we'd all agree that cheese is an essential element in Mexican cooking. But large-scale corporate cheese making has made small-scale artisan cheese production much rarer in recent years. One person who is working to change that on both sides of the Mexican border is Carlos Yescas. Carlos tracks down artisan cheesemakers throughout Mexico, and he works with them to produce world-class cheeses. The first thing that he looks for when developing a fantastic cheese? Healthy, happy animals. Javier Chauran is one of the cheese producers whose focus on sustainable methods has helped him to create one of Mexico's best cheeses. His herd of 150 goats eats a variety of grains and grasses that have been grown right there on Javier's farm. The milk they produce is so rich in enzymes because of this natural diet that Javier needs to do very little to turn it into a creamy, luscious cheese. He gently shapes the cultured curd into molds and then lets them sit for about 24 hours to dry out. One of his cheeses, called Pasión, is formed into a heart shape and dusted with a thin layer of ash. Then after it's aged for about 10 days, the cheese is ready for sale. Along with his sister Georgina, Carlos takes these premium Mexican cheeses and sells them at his cheese stall in Mercado Roma. So where are we going to start on this wonderful exploration of artisan cheese?
We are going to try Pasión. This is a cheese that is not traditionally Mexican. But what we did is we find a cheesemaker that is making goat's milk cheeses. And he was trained in France as a cheesemaker. And I said, why don't we create a cheese that represents what new Mexican cheese is? He made it, and so he called it Pasión.
He called it Pasión.
So we are going to taste this one.
Wow. That's like a symphony of flavor. But that richness, complexity of that goat milk comes through. Those must be very happy goats.
Very happy goats.
Great. What's next?
It's a panela cheese that most people know. It's a cow's milk cheese in the traditional way with the
basket.
Exactly.
It's always in that basket form, and it's very fresh, right?
Yes, very fresh.
Very
Just
fresh.
like 3 days.
What you taste first here is milk, right? Which is sort of a weird thing to say when you're talking about cheese.
But this one really tastes milky, fresh milk.
Yeah, and that's the thing that we wanted to achieve in a good panela, is that you taste that these animals are well taken care of, that they're eating good feed, but it also is very light.
Very light. It's very light. You could use this as a dessert cheese. You could put it out with some fruit, and it would be a wonderful, wonderful dessert. What's next?
So we're gonna taste this cheese. It's called dalaje, which means winter in Otomi.
Oh, okay.
And the reason for that name is that this cheese is made with winter's milk, and it's aged them for 8 years. So it is really a winter cheese.
It looks a little bit like a Spanish cheese.
Yeah.
Like,
And so the interesting thing is that cheese making in Mexico started with the Spanish.
yes.
And also the first records that we have of cheese being in Mexico is of a manchego style made in the state of Nuevo León.
Oh, really? So this is sort of a little bit going toward that style.
Yeah, and it's sort of like coming full circle, because this is now also the first Mexican cheese to win a gold medal at the World Cheese Awards.
Is that true?
Yeah.
Oh,
So-
well, now I'm even more excited to taste
It's
it.
a
I
good
haven't had this
cheese.
one. So, but this one is made from sheep's milk.
Yeah.
Oh, that is so delicious.
So it's
a little
bit,
manchego-like.
a little manchego.
I mean, real manchego-like.
Yeah. But it is also a little bit sharper than manchego, right?
A little sharper. And I can see how, if I made some enchiladas verdes, some roasted tomatillo sauce on the top of it, maybe a little bit of grilled chicken on the inside, and I put this over the top, it would be unbelievably delicious.
So next cheese, the king of Mexican cheese, cotija. So these cheesemakers take their cows to the top of the mountain of the Sierra Jalmich for the raining season. And they start making cheese up in the mountains, they start aging it there, and then they bring it down to the town of Cotija.
It's an aged cheese, usually used as a garnishing cheese, like you would use a Romano or a Parmesan cheese, something like that. But there are so many of them that are just bland and salty. Let's taste this one and talk about
how it's different than that bland, salty cheese.
The only way to preserve this cheese up in the mountains was rubbing salt outside of it. What people remember was the saltiness of it, not necessarily the creaminess of it.
Because this has got lots of texture to it. And it would stand up against other garnishing cheeses from around the world. When you sprinkle this over something, you're really going to know it's there, not just for its salt, but for its flavor. This has been an amazing experience to be able to taste these cheeses with you. Thank you so very much.
Thank you, Rick, for coming.
To be able to share a moment with Carlos is like the biggest gift in the world to me. He's so keenly sensitized to variations in things that I learn something from him every time that I taste cheese. Sometimes I'm just in the mood for cheese. Usually melted cheese. Usually melted cheese in a quesadilla. That is one of the most comforting foods on the planet for me. But sometimes I got friends coming over, so I feel the need to make it a little bit nicer. So sometimes I'll choose a nicer cheese. What I've got right here is a 3-month-old manchego made from sheep's milk. And instead of just a rotisserie chicken to tear up and put in there, I thought about some shrimp. So I bought these shrimp that are already peeled and deveined. And I'm going to skewer them. The reason I'm going to skewer them is that it makes it really easy to flip them over on the grill. Everything cooks very evenly. And slice an onion. I only need a couple of nice thick slices to grill alongside those shrimp. Grab my oil mister and I'm headed to the grill. I'm going to spray the onion slices and the shrimp skewers with some oil. Grill that onion till it's soft and browned. The shrimp will take very little time. I want to cook them until they're just barely done on the inside, still just a little bit translucent. All the prep is done. I split those shrimp after pulling the tails off so that you kind of butterfly them into 2 pieces. The onion is chopped here. Of course, the manchego is grated. I have some really nice flour tortillas, fairly large ones. So this is a little cooler on this side of the grill for me, so I'm going to lay the tortilla in that spot because I want to make sure that I don't burn it right away. Put a big handful of cheese, evenly distributed over the top. And then we'll wait until it starts to melt there. While that's happening, I can sprinkle on some onion, some of these shrimp. When the cheese is about half melted here, I'm going to fold over the tortilla, move it onto the hotter side of the grill, and then just keep flipping it until it's as done as I like. Of course, I want the cheese to be melted on the inside, but I like it to char a little bit on that quesadilla. I think it's really delicious. I'm gonna open this little beauty up, steaming like that. This is a grilled tomato and jalapeno salsa. This kind of elevates the idea of a quesadilla to something both comforting and very special. Chef Jorge Vallejo creates dishes at his restaurant Quintonil with some of the specialty Mexican cheeses that he sources through Carlos. One of my absolute favorite dishes at Quintonil is huazontles, those Mexican greens in a tomato sauce that's made with the doble crema cheese. And of course, there's the cheese soup. Jorge starts the soup by cutting quesillo cheese from Chiapas into half-inch cubes. He puts those into a saucepan and fills it with cream, milk, and a little bit of water. He crisps 4 corn tortillas on a griddle and then adds them whole to the cheese mixture and brings it to a slow simmer. Jorge then cuts a red onion into thin strips and finely minces it. Then he does the same with a fresh chili. He squeezes lime juice over the onion and chili and seasons the mixture with salt. Next, Jorge cuts up a third of a plantain into large pieces. He blends the warm cheese and tortilla mixture until smooth and creamy. Then he pours it through a mesh strainer back into the pot. To plate the soup, he spoons the onion and chili mixture into the bottom of each bowl and layers it with plantain, herbs, and flower petals. He pours the luscious soup over the accompaniments, and it's time to eat.
You know, it takes me right back to my first apartment in Mexico City, and this lady would sit up about a block away every day, and she would make these gorgeous quesadillas, and that is the flavor. It's that toasted tortilla and that cheese, that quesillo that he puts in there. It's just stunning.
I tried really hard to find a cheesemaker that will have cheese that tasted like that all the
Yeah,
time.
so what do you look for when you're looking for a cheesemaker to represent?
First of all, I'm looking for someone that really loves the cheese that they're making.
Okay.
That's an easy thing to say, but it's actually quite difficult because a lot of the cheesemakers are in the business because they're making money and not necessarily because they love the craft. And so I always tell them, try your cheese first. And so if they love their cheese, I know that I'm gonna love their cheese as well, right?
The huazontles dish starts off with 6 peeled tomatoes and a quarter of an onion that are chopped roughly and put into a blender with water. That sauce is blended until it's smooth before it's poured into a pot and brought to a simmer. After it's reduced quite a bit, Jorge adds a whole green habanero chili and seasons it with salt. He prepares the huazontles, which are an unripened grain closely related to quinoa, by snipping the green grain off the stalk and into a large bowl. He mixes them with baking powder, salt, and flour, and adds them to beaten egg whites to form a very light batter. That huazontle batter is fried in small spoonfuls in a pot of oil and then drained on paper towels. To finish the sauce, Jorge adds a couple of handfuls of crumbled cheese and returns it to the blender, blends it till it's completely smooth, and then lets it cook down for about 3 hours. He spoons that creamy tomato sauce onto a plate, tops it with some steamed huazontles, more cheese crumbles, and then those little fried huazontle croquettes.
Let's taste the other dish.
So this is my absolute favorite dish from Jorge.
It's so green and it's so, I don't know, the texture of it is, it's chewy-ish. I don't know, I just love it.
I grew up eating huazontles from my grandmother's, and this is one of those things that is like, yeah, this is almost as good as grandma's.
You have to say almost
Yeah.
as good. I would guess that when you find cheese makers that really love what they're doing and have a really well taken care of herd, that their cheese can be a little more expensive than just the run-of-the-mill stuff.
I really believe that what you're paying in cheese is really quality. And cheese is, milk, salt, some enzymes, and that's about it. There's really nothing else. So you need very good milk that you should be paying a premium price on good milk because you don't want any of those hormones on it. And then it is a little bit more expensive. Now there's many ways to make cheese cheap, and that's putting potato starch and vegetable fat and all these things that you really don't want to eat anyway. So it is more expensive to have very good cheese, but also I think you end up using less cheese because it tastes so much more.
But now you're working toward bringing it to the U.S. so that all of us that cook Mexican food in the U.S. can have these great cheeses to cook with. So what have been the hurdles with that? What have your challenges been?
There is really an anxiety in the United States about what is coming out from the outside that is artisanal, that is small producer. So we hope that we can bring cheese to the United States. Ultimately, if consumers want something, laws change to accommodate the consumer.
Wow. Okay, so until we get these beautiful cheeses in the States, what should I use as a replacement for that?
I think at the moment there are excellent ricottas being made in the United States with good milk in the United States, and so you can replace some of the things. And you could make it yourself. I mean, this is a double cream cheese that you could make at home. I mean, I know it sounds like a tall task to be making cheese, but
It's totally doable.
it's totally doable.
It's totally doable, and I'm with you. I would make my own, I think. I never thought about making cheese at home until I tasted this milk from a local dairy. It was so delicious. And so I tried to investigate why it was so good, and this is what they told me. And I believe it. First of all, it's from a small herd that's grass-fed, organic grass. And it's that pasteurized, small batches, lower temperature. It's not homogenized. And well, this stuff just tastes so rich. I think it tastes exactly what milk should taste like. So I thought, could we distill that in a simple way into a cheese, a fresh cheese that would capture the deliciousness of all of that milk? So it came up with ricotta because that's the easiest cheese to make. It's an acid-set cheese, not a rennet-set cheese, meaning that it's within the grasp of every single person. So I'm going to show you how to make it. First of all, this is not homogenized, so I should shake it a little bit. And I'm going to pour it into a large, heavy pan. This takes a full gallon of milk. I mean, if you're going to make cheese at home, you might as well make enough to last for a little while. Second ingredient is a quart of buttermilk. This will add some beautiful richness, a developed cultured flavor. And then we're going to set it with acid. Some people will set it with citric acid, but I don't care for the flavor of that as much as I do some fresh squeezed lime juice. So I need a half a cup of fresh lime juice. The lime juice goes into the milk mixture. Turn it on to about a medium heat, and we're going to stir it gently for a little while. Let it slowly rise to 190 degrees. You'll need a thermometer to be able to do this accurately. That took about 20 minutes for that to slowly come up to that 190 degrees. Now you can notice that you have your cheese curds, your ricotta curds here on the top, and using a skimmer, that's the easiest way for me to do that. I'm going to scoop those curds off. Over here I have a colander that's lined with damp cheesecloth set over a bowl. Out of this gallon of milk, we should get about a pound of ricotta. Now it looks like I've gotten all the curd out of there. The way, well, maybe it goes to your dog, into the plants, I don't know, but there's really not a lot more that we could do with that. The curd, we will allow to drain for about 30 minutes or so until you get the consistency that you like. I like this ricotta to stay a little bit creamy, so 30 minutes is plenty for me. If you wanted to let it go further so you could crumble it up over a salad, then maybe you'll let it drain for an hour. I like to refrigerate it for at least 30 minutes to set the curd before I use it for anything. When you've got cheese this delicious, well, maybe it should be the first bite that you offer to your guests. I'll show you a little appetizer that you can make with these beautiful beets that I brought from the farmer's market and that fresh-made ricotta. Now, we're going to flavor this with ancho chili. So that's going to be my first step, is to prepare that ancho. And I'm going to just cut the stem of it off like that. Dump out the seeds. And cut them into small pieces. Now we're going to need to toast these anchos. So I'm going to heat some olive oil in a skillet. over kind of medium to medium-high heat. A little more olive oil than you might expect here, about 3 tablespoons. And when that's hot, I'll add the anchos all at once, stir them around for about 30 seconds or so, and then drain them on a plate lined with a paper towel. We just want to toast them until they release their aroma in the kitchen. And then these beets are going to go into the skillet that we cooked those anchos in. And in just a couple of minutes of stirring, they should be softened. Those look tender now. I'm going to let them cool to room temperature before I combine them with that fresh-made ricotta and finish this little appetizer. Now it's time to put this thing together. I'm going to scoop a cupful of our fresh-made ricotta into a bowl here. Add the cooled beets, sauteed with olive oil. I have chopped up a bunch of toasted peanuts. Put about half of those in. I'll save some for a garnish. Some chopped parsley, and about half of this ancho that we toasted. Mix everything together until it's really well blended. Season this now with salt. Remember that the cheese has no salt in it at all yet, and neither do the beets. Then I'm going to scoop our fresh cheese and beet mixture onto some grilled bread, top it with some chopped peanuts and parsley, a little crumble of ancho, and some cracked black pepper.
While your fresh-made ricotta works perfect as a welcoming bite for your guests, it also works great as a very, very simple dessert. Now, when I lived in Mexico, one of my favorite desserts was to go to the market and buy the fresh-made requesón, as they call their ricotta, some fresh figs, local honey, just make a beautiful plate. Well, that's what I'm going to do today. Though I went to my market, and it's the height of peach season, nectarine season, raspberry season. And so I'm going to combine that into a very simple dessert. I think I'll start here with one of these beautiful nectarines. They just are filling the kitchen with their aroma right now. Pull that apart, pull out the seed, cut it into thin slices, and pile those into, well, I like to use something that's like a pasta bowl. Top that with some of these raspberries, and then scoop up some of this ricotta, just make a kind of rough canal out of it. Put another little bit of it right alongside there. I have some wildflower honey from one of our local sources here around Chicago. Drizzle that over the whole thing. Now at this point, you could tear up some mint leaves and sprinkle those over. That would be sort of expected and typical for a dessert, but my favorite way to do it is to add a little bit of spice with some cracked black pepper. You get the sweet and the savory all together. That is actually one of my all-time favorite desserts.